Today's tutorial is going to be all about how we solve systems of inequalities. Before I jump into how we solve systems of inequalities, I first want to refresh your memory on how we graph an inequality. So I have an example here, and we start off by graphing this like we would a normal equation, where we start with the y-intercept of -4, put a point at -4, then we use our slope to find the next point, so rise 2, run 3, and then we connect it. But remember, with an inequality, we need to pay attention to what our symbol is. If it's only greater than, it's not equal to, it's only greater than, we use a dashed line to connect the points. And arrows at the end. Then the final part is we needed to shade one side or the other. So if y is greater than, that means we need to shade above the line. And that was how we graphed inequalities. Okay, so now let's get into the actual system of inequalities. So a system of inequalities is similar to a system of equations where you have more than one inequality, and we want to see where these two inequalities are equal to each other, where their solutions overlap or touch each other. So the first step that we're going to do is graph both of these inequalities. So I'll start off with this first one. The y-intercept is 2 and my slope -x. This means my slope is -1/1. So I rise -1, I run 1, and connect with a line. And this time I'm connecting with a solid line because I have a equal to with my greater than. It's greater than or equal to. And then y is bigger, so I will shade above the line. And then I will do the same with the second inequality. This time my y-intercept is -2. Oops, let me use my pen instead of my highlighter. Then the slope is 2/1, rise 2, run 1. And this time I will connect with a dashed line because it is not equal to, it is only greater than. And on this one, y is smaller, so I will shade below the line. So the place where these two solutions overlap is in this section right here. You can see there's red and blue. So our solution to the system of inequalities would be this section right here. So I can actually just go ahead and, oops, I don't want to erase the line, but I do want to erase the shading here. And my solution is going to be this section right here where both areas, the shading overlaps. Okay, so that's pretty much the main idea of what we're doing, is how we solve a system of inequalities. We're looking for the place where the shading overlaps. There's just one more thing I want to highlight for you to make sure that you get. So when we're looking at these two inequalities, I know that when I graph them, they're going to be parallel because they have the same slope, but both of them have a -1 as their slope and different y-intercepts. So I know they're going to be parallel, which if these were equations, that would mean I'd have no solution. But because they are inequalities, it depends on our shading, which direction is y bigger or smaller. So we'll see if the shading overlaps or not. So I'm going to quick graph these off camera. Okay, so I just graphed the lines. I haven't done the shading yet. I used a solid line on both since both of the symbols can also be equal to. So now I'm going to go ahead and shade. So here's my -1 y-intercept. Here's this first inequality. Here's the line. Y is less than, so I will shade below. And on the top one, y is greater than, so I will shade above. And the red and the blue do not overlap, so in this case, our answer would be no solution. They do not overlap. Let's say though, for example, our inequalities look like this. I have the same inequalities. All I did was I switched the direction of the symbols. I switched them out for each other. Let's see how these are shaded now, if they overlap or not. So here's my -1 y-intercept. The first inequality is this line down here. Y is greater than, so that means I shade above the line. And then our next one, y is less than, so I will shade below this line here. And I can see that they overlap right here in this section. So this is the solution, and I can get rid of my extra shading. And notice how when I was shading, I used different colors, red and blue. I would highly, highly recommend you do the same. It makes it really easy to see where the shading overlaps. You can either use different colors or a different pattern, like shade in one direction and then shade in the opposite direction. Something like that, it helps you to really easily see where they overlap. And that's a basic idea for how we solve systems of inequalities. So there's 5 practice problems now for you to try this on your own and make sure that you understand this.